Good morning, Sabah. How are you, teacher? Today, inshallah, we will continue Unit 6, اللي هو Mr. Duffy's workshop. Do you remember our story, our lovely story? What happened in the previous class? We're talking about that grandfather wanted George to go to Mr. Duffy's workshop to collect a present, and that present, it was for George's little cousin Sally, right? Now, what happened next? Let's continue paragraph number 3. Okay, before we start, explain the paragraph. Let's read it before. George nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Duffy, he said. George stepped into the small courtyard, brilliant with the flowers cascading in streams of white, pink, and crimson from pots of the window sills. In one corner, a peach tree dropped its branches laden with golden fruit. Near the tree, a door stood open. George crossed the courtyard and stepped inside Mr. Duffy's workshop. This was one of the George's favorite places in all the world, and Mr. Duffy was one of his favorite people. Okay? Mr. Duffy was leaning over his workbench. On the wall beside him, clean but well-used screwdrivers, chisels, and blazers of varying sizes were ranged in neat racks, alongside hammers and saws rows of tiny paint pots and varnish stood on the narrow shelves with fine, delicate brushes in long plastic boxes and pots of screws and nails. Mr. Duffy's glasses were perched on the end of his nose, and he was looking carefully at a thick piece of wood. He ran his long fingers gently over the surface. He was throwing a little with an air of concentration. He scrutinized the wood for a few seconds. Then he stood straight with an expression of satisfaction. At that moment, he noticed George and turned towards him with a welcoming smile. Yeah, let's start. Okay. George stepped into the small courtyard. Okay, courtyard. So, what do you mean by courtyard? Courtyard, that is the place where located in front of the door. Okay, brilliant with the flower cascading in streams of white, pink, and crimson for pots. So, what do you mean by crimson? Crimson, it's a dark red. Okay. From pots on the window sills. In the corner, peach trees dropped its branches laden with golden fruit. Okay. Near the tree, a door stood open. George crossed the courtyard and stepped inside Mr. Duffy's workshop. Okay, before we continue, so what things were growing in the courtyard? Okay, what things were growing in the courtyard? We have, or there are peaches, right? Peach trees, and flowers. Okay, and flowers. So George crossed the courtyard and stepped inside Mr. Duffy's workshop. This was one of George's favorite places in all the world. As we said before, he loved and he loved talking to Mr. Duffy because he wanted to talking about his work, and he was fascinated by Mr. Duffy tools, as we said before. Okay, so Mr. Duffy was one of his favorite place. Okay, now let's move. Mr. Duffy was leaning over his workbench. So leaning from verb lean, it means to bend over a little. Okay, so where is it? Yeah, leaning it means to bend over a little. Okay, over his workbench. On the wall beside him, clean but well-used screwdrivers. So what do you mean by screwdrivers here? Okay, screwdrivers are tools used for turning screws. So, tools used for turning screws. Okay, chisels and lasers of varying sizes were ranged in neat racks, along hammers and saws. So we have a question here. What things were in Mr. Duffy's workshop? So what things were in the Mr. Duffy workshop? There were tools, paints, and varnish. Okay, tools like screwdriver, chisels, and blazers, and varnish of or varying sizes were arranged in a net racks. Right. So let's continue. And so rows rows of tiny paint booths and varnish. Okay, stood on narrow shelves with fine. So where does it stood or is stand? Often where does it stand? There are or it stood on a narrow shelves with a fine. Okay, so a delicate brushes in long plastic boxes and puts of screws and nails. Okay, so we also they have boxes of and puts of screws and nails. Okay, all of these screws, nails, tools used for turning screws, and he used it. Mr. Duffy used it for his workshop. Okay, so let's continue. Mr. Duffy glasses were perched on the end of his nose. Yes, and he was looking carefully at the thick piece of wood. So, what was Mr. Duffy doing when George went into the workshop? He looking carefully, okay, at a thick piece of wood. So he was looking carefully at a thick piece of wood when George went into the workshop. Okay, yeah, let's continue. He ran his long fingers gently. It refers to Mr. Duffy. Okay, underline it. His long fingers gently over the surface. He was throwing a little with an air of concentration. Okay, full of concentration here. He synchronized the wood for a few seconds. So synchronized, focus. He was focused. Okay, the wood for the second. Then he stood up straight of the expression of satisfaction. Satisfaction, it means يعني يمس رضا. Okay, in English, a feeling of being pleased. Okay, a feeling of being pleased. And synchronized, it means to look at something very carefully, to focus. Okay, so he was feeling of being pleased. Okay, at that moment he noticed George and turned towards him with welcoming smile. Okay, welcoming smile. He is very pleased when he saw George. Okay, so George goes into the Mr. Duffy workshop and he saw him looking carefully at his tools. Okay, in this paragraph here, the writer he is talking about the tools. So here we have a descriptive story. He described everything in the workshop as you see. Okay, he described his workshop, and he described the tools that he used when he worked in the workshop. Right. So we will continue inshallah next class.